The crystal chandelier caught the afternoon light as my sister Victoria slammed the car keys on the mahogany dining table. The metallic clang echoed through the silence like a gunshot. "Paid in full. Cash," she said, her voice steady as granite. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched their faces drain of color. My wealthy siblings who had spent 20 years treating me like a stray dog begging for scraps. I am the youngest of 4, the one they called the failure behind closed doors and sweetie to my face. But now, standing in their pristine dining room where I'd been humiliated countless times, I felt something shift. The woman who had apologized for existing was about to show them exactly what 20 years of their cruelty had built. Before we begin, if you enjoy true and exciting stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Write in the comments what city or country you are watching from. Now, let's get to the beginning of this story. Growing up as the youngest Morrison sibling meant growing up in a world of polished marble floors and whispered comparisons. Our family home in Connecticut sprawled across 3 acres, every corner designed to impress rather than comfort. The smell of expensive leather furniture mixed with Mother's Chanel perfume created an atmosphere of cold luxury that never quite felt like home. During our weekly family dinners, I'd sit at the far end of the mahogany table, watching my older siblings, Richard, Margaret, and Victoria, discuss their prestigious careers and social connections while I pushed food around my plate. Their voices carried the confidence of people who'd never questioned their place in the world, never wondered if they deserved the oxygen they breathed. Richard managed hedge funds, Margaret ran an art gallery, and Victoria had married into pharmaceutical money. Then there was me, 28 years old, working double shifts at a downtown diner, still driving the same beat-up Honda I'd bought in college. The chandelier above cast perfect light on their designer clothes while leaving me in shadow, a metaphor so obvious it hurt. Mother would smile tightly when anyone asked about my life, as if my very existence was a social embarrassment she had to endure. Nothing in that house ever gathered dust, not even their disappointment in me. The small humiliations started early and never stopped. Victoria would accidentally forget to invite me to family gatherings, then post photos on social media showing everyone laughing without me. Margaret had a talent for compliments that cut like razors. "That dress is so brave of you, dear. Most people wouldn't dare wear something so unique." Richard simply pretended I didn't exist unless he needed someone to blame for family drama. During holiday seasons, they'd exchange expensive gifts while handing me gift cards to chain restaurants, their smiles saccharine with false affection. I began staying after their parties to clean up, partly to help Mother, but mostly because no one expected conversation from the hired help. The sound of their laughter always seemed to stop when I entered a room, replaced by polite but distant smiles. I'd catch them exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking, those subtle eye rolls that said more than words ever could. At Mother's birthday last spring, Victoria had actually handed me her empty champagne glass during the toast, assuming I was serving staff. The crystal felt cold in my palm, but not as cold as her expression when she realized her mistake. Something inside me cracked that night, though I wouldn't understand what it meant for months to come. The breaking point came during Richard's promotion party at the country club. I'd worn my best dress, a simple black number I'd saved months to buy, and arrived early to help set up. Victoria cornered me by the coat check, her voice honey-sweet and venomous. "Sweetie, we need to talk about your situation." Her perfectly manicured fingers gestured vaguely at my life. "It's becoming embarrassing. Richard's colleagues are starting to ask questions about our families. Diversity of success." The word diversity dripped with disdain. Margaret appeared beside her like a well-dressed vulture, nodding sympathetically. "We've all talked, and we think it might be best if you took some time to figure things out. Maybe skip a few family events while you get your life together?" The champagne in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Around us, their friends laughed and clinked glasses, completely unaware that my sisters were trying to erase me from the family photo. The air conditioning hummed softly overhead, but I felt like I was suffocating in perfume and judgment. Richard joined the conversation, his voice patronizingly gentle. "We're just concerned about you, kiddo. This lifestyle isn't sustainable." That night, driving home in my old Honda with tears streaming down my face, I made a decision that would change everything. The woman who accepted their scraps died in that country club parking lot. 3 months later, everything shifted. I'd been working late shifts at the diner, saving every penny and living on ramen noodles, when Mrs. Patterson shuffled in during the graveyard shift. She was 92, sharp as a tack, and lonely enough to tip me $50 for listening to her stories about her late husband. What started as kindness turned into something deeper when she asked if I'd help her organize her affairs. Her children lived across the country and rarely called. I became the granddaughter she'd never had. I'd visit her after work, helping with groceries, organizing medications, just sitting with her while she shared decades of memories. The smell of lavender and old books in her apartment became more comforting than anything in my family's mansion. She'd made her fortune in real estate decades ago, buying up properties when no one believed in downtown development. "Most people see what is," she'd tell me, her weathered hands gentle on mine. "Smart people see what could be." When she passed peacefully in her sleep 6 months later, I was holding her hand. At the funeral, I was the only mourner under 70. Her lawyer read the will to an empty room except for me. She'd left me everything: $2 million, a portfolio of rental properties, and a letter that simply said, "For the granddaughter who chose love over blood." Suddenly, the ground beneath my family's feet wasn't as solid as they'd believed. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing property deeds in Mrs. Patterson's old apartment. Victoria's voice was different, strained, almost pleading. "We need to talk, all of us. Can you come for dinner this Sunday?" No fake sweetness, no condescending pet names, just barely concealed desperation. I'd been planning this moment for weeks, ever since Mrs. Patterson's lawyer had finished transferring everything into my name. The rental properties alone generated more monthly income than Richard's salary, and the real estate development potential was staggering. I'd spent my inheritance carefully, quietly buying out my family's debts, their country club membership fees, Richard's mortgage on his condo, Margaret's gallery lease, Victoria's husband's medical practice loan. Paper trails led everywhere when you knew where to look. My brother Mark, the family rebel who'd become an investigative journalist, had helped me trace the connections. "They're all leveraged to their eyeballs," he'd explained, spreading documents across my new dining table. "One push, and the whole house of cards comes down." Sunday afternoon, I dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, grabbed the manila envelope full of receipts, and drove to the house where I'd spent a lifetime feeling small. This time, I was coming home to collect what I was owed. The dining room felt different when you held all the power. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she poured wine, and Richard kept checking his phone with increasing anxiety. Margaret sat perfectly straight, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. Mother was absent, conveniently visiting her sister, they'd said. The meal passed in stilted conversation about weather and current events, everyone dancing around the elephant in the room. Finally, Victoria cleared her throat. "We know you've been busy lately, acquiring things." Richard leaned forward, his hedge fund confidence cracking slightly. "Look, we need to discuss some family financial matters." I set down my fork and smiled, really smiled, for the first time in their presence in years. "You mean the mortgages I bought? The loans I assumed? The debts I now own?" The silence stretched like piano wire. Margaret's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the sound sharp and insistent against the thick quiet of their shock. "You see," I continued, my voice calm as still water, "Mrs. Patterson taught me that most people confuse wealth with worth. You three have spent so much time polishing your image. You forgot to secure your foundation." Richard's phone buzzed again, This time, when he looked at the screen, all color drained from his face. The banks had started calling. The next 3 weeks unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion. Richard's hedge fund clients began pulling their investments after rumors surfaced about his personal financial instability. Margaret's gallery lost its prime location when I chose not to renew their lease, and Victoria's husband discovered that his practice's biggest creditor was suddenly very interested in calling in favors. I watched it all from my new office in Mrs. Patterson's old building, now fully renovated and humming with the sound of honest business. The view overlooked the downtown district that everyone had written off years ago, the same area Mrs. Patterson had believed in when no one else would. Mark stopped by regularly, bringing coffee and updates on our siblings' increasingly desperate situations. "Victoria called me 3 times yesterday," he'd report, shaking his head. "Wants to know if I can talk sense into you." But there was no malice in his voice, only a kind of sad amazement. He'd been the family outcast for choosing journalism over law, and he understood what it meant to be dismissed by people who should love you unconditionally. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that the 2 failures of the Morrison family were now the only ones with solid ground beneath our feet. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, sometimes it simply redistributes the balance of power with quiet, methodical precision. Today, I pour my morning coffee in the kitchen of my modest downtown apartment, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and possibility. The view isn't as impressive as the family estate, but every corner of this space belongs to me, earned through kindness, patience, and an old woman's faith in human goodness. My phone rings occasionally with calls from my siblings, their voices progressively more humble with each conversation. Yesterday, Margaret actually apologized, a real apology, not the performative kind she used to offer after particularly cruel comments. Richard has started therapy and downsized to an apartment he can actually afford without credit. Victoria's marriage is stronger now that they've learned to live within their means instead of maintaining an image. We're all learning new dances, new ways to exist in a world where worth isn't measured in square footage or designer labels. Mrs. Patterson's legacy isn't just the money she left me. It's the lesson that real wealth comes from seeing people's hearts, not their bank accounts. Last Sunday, I hosted dinner for the first time since inheriting her fortune. Mark brought his wife and kids, and even Mother came, her eyes soft with something that might have been pride. As we shared a simple meal around my small table, I realized this was what family was supposed to feel like: warm, accepting, and free from the weight of expectations. The woman who had apologized for breathing was finally learning to take up space in her own life. And you? What do you think? Did she do the right thing? What would you have done in her place? If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us what you thought in the comments. Your support is what helps us continue bringing you exciting stories like this one. Now watch other stories on screen. We'll see you next time, with love and respect.